God, you absolute mad lad. What's up, guys? Heretic you here. And yeah, we are talking about the news that just dropped that Henry Cavill, Superman, or was Superman, The Witcher, you know the guy, huge 40K nerd, is actually going to be working with Amazon in producing a Warhammer TV series, live action. Now, I've had sort of a spotted history with Games Workshop and 40K. It undoubtedly has a soft spot in my heart as the first tabletop game that I actually played and got into right after D&D. It's one that I played for years, and it's, I think everybody in the tabletop hobby has started with either Warhammer Fantasy or 40K, or have touched on them at some point. So, in a way, this whole tabletop hobby wouldn't really exist without Warhammer or Warhammer 40K. So part of me is really excited about the idea of 40K tabletop wargaming, that whole universe sort of entering into the larger stage. It's already invaded video games, so we have things like, Warhammer Total War, which is, beloved RTS. We have Darktide, we have Vermintide. They have a ton of games, Necromunda, that, we used to just dream about as tabletop wargamers. Now, there's just a ton of 40K and fantasy-based games that are actually really good. So, in a way, them going to a next stage would be something that I think was kind of what we were expecting with like Warhammer Plus, like a TV show about the 40K universe. I mean, there are plenty of possibilities. Who knows what you can do with it? I will always remain very cautious about this because tabletop wargaming, in my opinion, is the last bastion of geek culture that hasn't been hit by, the large, really, hit by normie culture. Because usually when that happens, when the normies invade, you get bastardization of was once that subculture. Let me explain. Right, what does that mean? So just think about like 20 years ago, you couldn't walk down the street and say the name Tony Stark, and no one would know what the hell you're talking about. Nowadays, you say the name Tony Stark, everyone knows Iron Man. Everybody knows who Captain America is. These are now ingrained in normal pop culture. I'd say the same thing about video games. When I was younger, in my early youths, and so there's benefits and definite drawbacks to that happen. The biggest drawback, in my opinion, is what I call the normie effect. So something becomes almost like hyper monetized, right? It's like video games back in the day. I remember when like EA made a game called Lakers versus Celtics, and they had a picture of the dev team. It was like a dozen dudes. Nowadays, like video games are basically taking on movie-sized budget, like big action blockbuster budgets. And, there's something to be said about the lost, I think that's why indie games, there's always a spot for indie games, is because these smaller guys that are just making great games, we still want that as a community. But with, something being aware in the normie consciousness, we'll say, it gets hyper monetized, and can become very vanilla. The 40K universe itself has changed throughout the years. It's become sort of before it was unapologetically dark, and now they've kind of softened it up. Even things like my beloved Blood Bowl, you could tell that political correctness has seeped in, because they for something to be more digestible to the average normie, you can't have it as controversial, so it loses its edge. You know what I'm saying? So even take Marvel movies over time, you will see that they become more formulaic and, sort of take less risks as as more money gets poured into it, more risk happens that like this has to be successful. So they have to appeal to a wider audience, and by default that means you have to trade some of that authenticity, or some of that edge, or some of the, in our case 40K, right, it'd be that grim darkiness, because people aren't just down with the grim dark, right? They're gonna changes will happen. Excited as I am to see that people will finally understand what tabletop wargaming is, and maybe discover it, and maybe it becomes more readily available, and more people are playing, which means more games. So there's all of that good stuff that could arise from this, like, one moment in time where boom, 40K hits the main screen and people are like, what is this world, right? But you still have to look back at history and see that subcultures, especially geek culture, being subverted by like money and just just kind of the natural order of things. It changes over time, and becomes less of what it was. For now, I remain optimistic. It's cool. Henry Cavill's a cool dude. He definitely is a real fan of tabletop wargaming, and so it's nice that he will become the face of it. So that's cool. And I'll just be along for the ride. Hopefully, maybe there might be a Blood Bowl show coming. Those are my initial thoughts on this. If you like this video, do all the hit the and then smash the and I'll see you in the next one.